Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, no question, the Corps has an excessive amount of authorized water infrastructure projects by Congress. You all, the Corps, you have the technical expertise to complete these projects. Oftentimes, the state has allocated their cost share of those expenses, yet there still remains billions of dollars of backlog of projects. And what I'm wondering is another piece of this, that arbitrary quota that gets put on the new starts that can exist out there, limits the Army Corps to a select number of new starts each year. Can you speak to, does that policy, that new start policy, does that delay the Army Corps from completing some of the water infrastructure projects out there? Is that something we need to look at for reform for you?
I think just from our approach, sir, clearly it's a relatively minor investment to be able to do a study to inform Congress of where can the money be put to the best place. So if in fact there is an arbitrary limit that's put on us on studies, then of course we can't do that degree of analysis. So I think that in honesty, I do think there's limiting our capability to be able to inform Congress of where best to put to work. On the other hand, there's probably got to be some degree of guidance. You can't do too many studies because then we're just going to continue to keep adding. So there's probably a sweet spot somewhere, and I'll let the Secretary or the administration figure out where that is.
So let's jump to that a little bit, those feasibility studies. The readiness of the Corps to conduct these feasibility studies, to begin construction projects, oftentimes you have to wait for an appropriations cycle to move to the next phase of what's going on there. I was listening to your testimony from yesterday, and you literally said, our feasibility studies, they're formulated with the assumption of efficient funding. Most of all are multi-year projects, yet we are budgeted on an annual basis with no assurances that adequate funding will be available from year to year. This creates uncertainty for our non-federal sponsors. It drives up costs and it delays the realization of benefits. And what I'm wondering is there's some reform that can go on in that area, maybe something in terms of development of some sort of revolving fund where the Corps isn't subject to the fiscal year constraints. It gives you a little bit more flexibility to advance to the next phase of project completion without having to wait for that year over year.
I think there's room in almost all of our processes to be able to find ways of streamlining, to give us more flexibility. Most of our money is allowed to carry over into another year, and we try to budget efficiently. So I don't have a problem with end of year having to necessarily obligate. But I do think where we really have challenges a lot of times is when we have a construction project where we get ready to go through something, and every single year it has to be revalidated. So that causes us to have a lot of confusion in the contractor base and the stakeholder base. So I think there's a lot of room, and this is what Chairman Graves said, there's a lot of things that we can do to try to somehow, how do you streamline some of these processes that have been too bureaucratic?
And that's what we want to get to, right? Cheaper, faster, but more efficient, and a great product that you produce. So I thank you for your time. Thank you for answering these questions. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.